Well, here's the real news hot off the presses. Basically, I don't give a flying fuck if you believe in fairies at the bottom of the garden. I might have said this before. I don't actually mind if people go around, abandoned houses and think they're looking for ghosts, and they think they find them. I really don't mind. But if you're trying to convince people that you have supernatural powers and people have to pay you a large amount of money for that, yeah, I consider that to be a fucking scam. If you claim to be a very, very accurate medium and you can't demonstrate that on controlled conditions, and people go to you and spend silly amounts of money on actually having readings, I have a problem with that. If you're a healer who claims that you can cure cancer, and you claim that you have a very high success rate of curing cancer and other conditions, I have a fucking problem with you. Even if you don't charge very much, I have a problem with you in that regard. But in terms of the average garden variety individual in the spiritual movement, do I have a problem with them? Well, what are they doing? They're wasting their own time and money on things that very often, at least in principle, are meant to make them feel good, to be happy. And if they can't really find happiness in other ways, maybe it's better in some ways that they cling to the idea of spirituality and miraculous powers as opposed to being a person in a lull, in a rut, a person in a depression. Because surely it's better they have something rather than nothing. And the same goes for mainstream religion, of course. This should not be news to anyone. If it works for you to go to church on Sunday, unless we have another peak in COVID, in which case you might have to put that on hold, then yes, enjoy it. Have it. And if it works for you, then so be it. I personally do not mind. It wouldn't matter even if I did, would it? To be entirely honest. If you're going to a mega church and your preacher is ripping you off, I don't have a problem with you. I have a problem with your preacher, who claims to believe it, but is making himself, it's usually a he, but sometimes women as well, a tidy profit. Such as with some of the heavily deregulated churches over the United States and also parts of Africa and other parts of the world, where people can make ridiculous amounts of money and get themselves private jets and all sorts of fancy Rolexes and other, luxuries. And yeah, I have a problem with those individuals. If you're a person who follows a guru cult leader, and your guru cult leader gives out really bad advice here and there, but they claim to be a perfectly enlightened being, do I have a problem with you following that person? Well, maybe a little, because the belief's silly, isn't it? The belief is silly, but you have the right. You have the choice in a free society, in a free world, or at least of those parts of the world that are free, to make up your own goddamn mind. So it doesn't really matter what I think in that regard, but I do have a problem with your guru. Especially when it turns out they're a pedophile, like, what's his name? Asaram Bapu. Or did he get off those charges? That was debatable. But in any case, I think it's worth pointing out that I don't actually have a problem with you, your right to believe as you will. I have problems with scams and factually incorrect information that can lead to harm of individuals. So if you make miraculous claims about how you can heal people, I have a problem with that. It's not just New Age, that's not just Indian gurus, that's also mainstream religion or shaman or whatever the case may be. If you're making that remarkable claim, I think you should, not deter people from going to see a real doctor. Even if you're a real doctor, you're not operating in a professional capacity as a shaman or as a faith healer or whatever the case may be. Some people do overlap. There are some intelligent people in superstitious beliefs, has to be said. So if you're willing to say, well, we for legal purposes, we cannot say that this is, this, or for legal purposes, this TV show of mediums is considered to be entertainment. For legal purposes, it is entertainment. I think that's reasonable. If you don't build your life around these ideas and become so devout and insulated against reality that you end up, effectively cutting yourself off from the rest of the world, I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem if you actually engage with reality. You just happen to have a belief. You go to church. I don't care if you're a Jehovah's Witness. Jehovah's Witnesses, some of the nicest people I've met, by the way, are Jehovah's Witnesses. And, I disagree with them. That's an intellectual argument, isn't it? That's the difference. It's between the intellectual point, which is about the intellectual discussion, and the points where I would actually have an issue, which would be another matter. Like the intellectual discussion over, cult characteristics and which cults we should actually ban. So I could have an intellectual discussion about cult characteristics within, say, the Roman Catholic Church, but should we ban the Roman Catholic Church? No, but we will ban, organisations that resemble Charles Manson's family, or certain churches that have actually been highly dangerous and can be simply corrected. Whereas the actions of the Roman Catholic Church, even in their worst cases, I'm using it as an example, they're basically able to reform, if they actually reform. But of course, if they should not, and they should have some certain negative characteristics, like effectively hiding away, a great many pedophiles, I have a fucking problem with that. So I can have a problem with an organisation, and indeed a worldview. But that does not mean I wish to put you into camps or, restrict your freedom. I don't wish to do that. However, I do feel in certain cases there are areas where you're too free. For example, on taxation. I do think the religion should be taxed. It's basically, if I had a social group, a club, if you will, it would basically, if it's something which actually people pay towards, there would be some level of taxation. You'd have to balance the books with a great many, fringe beliefs. They don't actually exist as an accepted religion, so they have to pay tax. So what should happen to everyday religion that is apparently more popular? It should probably pay tax. I think that's quite reasonable. Treat everyone fairly. And equally, otherwise you may as well say, right, social club, yeah, you don't have to pay tax anymore. Oh, right. The local boating club, yeah, you don't have to pay tax. The bowling club, you don't have to pay tax. Why? Because you're the same as a religion now. We're not going to do that, no. I think more places should pay tax, and I think it should be eased off the people, to be honest. All that money could be redirected into education and into other programs which help to develop society. I don't see why that should be the death of the religion either. There are many people who seem to have this kind of rejection of the progress that we have made as a civilization. And they would prefer if we had an ill-educated population who only learnt from certain organisations. With the Jehovah's Witnesses, they would prefer if everyone accepted the Watchtower magazine and the organisation behind it, and the Awake magazine, instead of actually accepting modern science. They would rather we accept various propaganda books they have, rather than dealing with real-world issues and accepting genuine factual information. So in other words, they're pseudo-scientific in that regard, because they very often misunderstand what is in fact scientifically true, say in regard to the human cell and how that operates. And yeah, they try and insert the idea of God, or the idea of whichever concept they have within the Bible, like say the end times or what have you. And I think that is harmful. So I think having proper taxation of that and putting that into education will probably be quite important. And it should not be a conflict. If they care about what is true, what is factually correct, what's real, there should not be a conflict between religion and science. Surely there are some things which you cannot actually prove or cannot fully dismiss. Well, okay, those things are yours, and you can choose to believe otherwise on Sunday or in your personal life, in your home and in your place of worship. But when it comes down to it, the educational system should not be influenced in any way by those people with a very biased view, a non-reality view, a view based on ancient books and very strong faith-based opinions. I should go without saying. So I don't actually have a problem with you. If you happen to be going to church, because I'm recording this on a Sunday, if you happen to be going to church today, then, if you're a Christian, or it's Kingdom Hall, if you're a Jehovah's Witness, so they name their churches Kingdom Halls. Well, I have no problem with you. I have a problem with some of your beliefs. Some of those beliefs, as I say, it's down to a matter of intellectual discussion and how we could actually look at these things. But if it's a serious issue, an issue which impacts people's lives and could be harmful to society or certain individuals within our society, then obviously that's where the law can step in. So, I can disagree over your view of God. Right. Doesn't mean no harm for you to believe in your view of God. Okay. I disagree. The idea of God, I don't believe in it. I don't accept the idea of God, but that's irrelevant as far as the law. Good. That's acceptable. But as far as encouraging people not to get blood transfusions or not to give blood, that's problematic. Or in certain sects, don't use condoms, like the Roman Catholics don't use condoms, although they've got certain special reasons why you can now. Okay, progress of a kind, but certain things should be changed. And obviously it comes down to personal preference, a lot of these ideas anyway. But I think teaching people factually incorrect information and even exempting certain people from certain types of education in school because of their religious background is potentially harmful. Why can't you actually have your belief and education compete fairly? Why would you say, for example, stop your child from learning about sex education? Because you're afraid they might have sex out of marriage. Is your religion not developed enough to actually educate your child on why they might not wish to do that and still remain as, say, I don't know, a devout Mormon or a devout Muslim or a devout Anglican or whatever the case may be? Is your belief not that developed, that strong, that organised? So I have no problem legally speaking, I have no problem with religion, except when they, basically limit how people perceive things, they prevent people from actually understanding things, which leads to greater problems down the road, and that's my major issue. It's my major issue there. If you happen to go back to New Age, a medium, and you tell a child that they're a particular special spirit, and you treat them specially, and you cause as a result a psychological distortion as far as how they develop. Well, I think that's very concerning. And indeed, one channeler, one guy who was effectively learning to be a medium in Birmingham, in a church I used to go to, a spiritualist church, he claimed he communicated with aliens. I think it was blue and green aliens. Don't ask me why. And he must have got that idea from somewhere. And yes, he told his nephew that you're a starseed. What's a starseed? In New Age, a starseed is one who has been seeded on Earth from a previous series of incarnations on other worlds, plainly speaking. And they've come to this Earth now to bring about a greater development, progress towards a new spiritual age. That's the concept in broad strokes, although some people would disagree on that particular definition. So he tells his nephew that, a kid who's having trouble at school, and the kid as a result ends up with more trouble because he believes in a ridiculous unreality to get himself through it. And what does the mother do? Not just the uncle who basically tells the nephew, hey, you're an alien in human body. That's why you're a little bit weird. So now you can continue to be weird. But then you end up with the situation of the mother basically agreeing. That could be majorly harmful. Majorly harmful, that could be greatly harmful to any developing person. And so, there should be some limitations on that. And we should not let these things get in the way of people's development. In fact, in some ways, wouldn't it be better if we all started only teaching kids about, belief and faith as they got older? Let them grow out of Santa Claus and all that kind of stuff. And if they want to accept Jesus at the age of 14, then good luck to them. But no, I think you have the right to teach your kids things, sure. But there are some things that perhaps aren't so good, like hell houses in America. Fundamentalist Christians send their kids to a fun house, basically, but it's full of hellish images. It's made to scare young children into accepting Jesus. That's fucking insane. And there are many other insanities in religion, and they're quite toxic. And I think we should obviously not accept those ideas as being acceptable and valid in a modern, developed society.